Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Frontera Radio. I am your host, Sergio Mora. We have a special guest today, another candidate that's running for office, Melissa Cigarroa, who is running for City Council District 3. Melissa, welcome to Frontera Radio.
Good morning.
Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Melissa, you've been active in politics and social issues for a while, right? Social issues for a while. Very active in RISC and the No Border Wall Coalition, and after a while, you decided to take a jump, the next step, run for elected office, run for city council. And I think that's great. I think we need good people like you. Desperately need good people like you in city council. There's 3 candidates, I think, in the race.
Three other candidates.
Three other candidates. Oh, I thought it was just 3.
So Mr. Abraham Lugo,
AB,
Mr. Gerardo Perez,
yes,
Jerry Perez, and Mr. Eric Wickstrom joined at the very last minute.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Okay. Is he the pizza guy?
I believe he's the owner of Wizard Wicks. Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, 4 people. And that's District 3. Can you tell us a little bit what District 3 entails?
So District 3 runs, if you think of Memorial Middle School, which was a St. Joseph's Academy, right? Yeah. Down to Market Street. And then just take that all the way east, like it's a block, and it goes all the way east with Gustavos as its northern border to Loop 20. It picks up Clark kind of towards Loop 20. It takes the southern part of Ponderosa Hills and turns south on Loop 20, and there are neighborhoods on either side, to 359. Yeah. And then it takes 359 east, and it takes the northern part of Santo Niño, and then there by the SAC and Vista Nueva. It skips Independence Hills, picks up again at Concord Hills, and just goes straight out 359 to the Ranchettes.
Wow, that's an eclectic mix of areas, mix. Right? Mm-hmm. It recently got redistricted. Recently,
yes. Yeah. So I'm running into people who didn't know now that they're in District 3.
Oh, I see. And how's that been? How's the campaigning been?
It's well, I enjoy meeting people, and they have such different stories, and they have such different backgrounds. I met this lovely couple. The gentleman's 90, and I'm assuming his wife is close in that age. She's from Uruguay, and he's from Mexico. They've been here and been citizens for decades now. Mm-hmm. But just beautiful stories, and about how they met. And it depends on how long you have to converse, right? But they were really lovely. I think my friend and I, who were block walking, must have looked pretty hot and tired. They invited us in for some water, and that's how we started. Great. Yeah, that's how we started the conversation.
Melissa, so tell me how you started to get involved in activism. What sort of was the spark, the impetus that got you started to worry, to get involved, to get active?
I think it started really when I first came to Laredo. My husband was working a lot, and I had 1 child at the time. And I asked my mother-in-law, well, I want to do something. Carlos is gone a lot, and my daughter and I are pretty mobile. And she said, well, let me introduce you to Sister Rosemary.
Okay.
Sister Rosemary Welsh. And so Sister Rosemary toured me around the colonias at the time. And you just saw the great inequality that existed here in Laredo. And I had visited Laredo as a kid. My mother and father are from here. And so I knew about it, but she knew families and stories. And so it was very eye-opening. And at the end of that, I told her, well, I have a child. I can do some. I can't do a whole lot. But I breastfeed my child. And at the time, breastfeeding was kind of having its moment again. It ebbs and flows, right?
Yeah.
And I said, I can help mothers breastfeed. I had a friend who helped me, so I thought, well, I can do this. And I actually went and got training. The state of Texas provided training at the time. So I was a little bit better prepared. And I remember I have had several children since then, but I remember taking my young child, my second child, in her car seat with me and taking her to mothers' homes. And she was a great prop, right? I could say, well, this is how you do it. And it was such an empowering act for me as a mother, coming into my own, understanding how, I don't mean to get sentimental, but how my body was totally prepared to nourish this child just from me. And I think maybe it's a mother thing, but that's incredibly empowering to know that your child's life is in your hands, but in a very literal way. Yeah. And they grow up healthy. They grow up great, right? Every time you go to the pediatrician's office, they tell you your child is doing wonderfully. So I wanted to share that experience. And because it was a bit controversial at the time, right? It gave me that sense of people just need to know. They need to be educated. Once they're educated, they can make choices. And it's an incredibly important choice for a mother to have. I think that's where it started, this idea that you reach out to people and you give them some education, and you're giving them not just that, but a way for them to become stronger in themselves. And
you lived outside of Laredo? You moved to Laredo from where?
So I grew up in San Antonio.
Okay.
And then my husband and I got married. I was pretty young, so out of college. And he trained in Seattle and then in Dallas, and then we came back to Laredo.
Okay.
And he was very sweet. He told me, listen, I remember Laredo coming here as a kid and as a teenager. It was very hot. There wasn't a lot to do, and I was really hesitant about living in Laredo. I had cousins and tias and tios, and my grandmother was still alive at the time. And he said, if you don't like it, we can go anywhere. You know, my specialty, we can live anywhere. And if you know the Cigarroa family, you know that he wasn't being entirely truthful. But it didn't matter. You know, I got here and I just loved it. I loved being around family. I loved having that, centering my kids, you know, in their history and their faith and their, and just a good sense of what it means to come from someplace and to have that background. I thought it was important for my family.
I met you when you were already very active in RISC and the No Border Wall Coalition. Was that a time where you got really, really just active, and why?
Yes. It was such an affront to who we are as a people and to our culture. The idea of placing this 30-foot high concrete and steel barrier separating us from our family in Mexico, making assumptions about, we must be involved somehow in this cartel violence. It somehow we're at fault, that we needed somebody to come and create a solution for us, because obviously we didn't know what we were doing here in Laredo. It was such a slap in the face to who we are as a people. And I thought the easiest thing to do, the most basic, was to stand up and say, you're lying, and no, we will not accept this. Because not only is it a lie to who we are, but it would endanger the public health and safety of our families here. And whether that's the psychological damage of living in basically a prison, next to a prison wall, or the incredible destruction along the river. And, you know, we would walk neighborhoods and try to tell people, you need to vote in this election. It's incredibly important. It was the 2020 election, and we knew that the two candidates had very different views about how our border should be treated. And we would ask people, step outside of, your home and look down the street and you could be staring at a 30-foot wall. It was going to be built right on the edge of the river, and the destruction to the habitat of the vega there, the impact on our river and our only source of drinking water was going to be tremendous. And so how could you not stand up and say that is wrong, and I will not accept that, not only for my family but the future family of my children?
I remember that whole time, and you guys were very effective in working with local entities, with the city and the county to get their cooperation.
The different coalitions.
The landowners. That's the landowners. That's right. Can you tell us a little bit about that aspect of the whole? It wasn't just protesting. It was really intense, organizing, really intense, reaching out to elected officials, getting them to sponsor resolutions, opposing this. Can you tell us a little bit about all that activity?
So the Rio Grande Landowners Coalition was kind of thought up as a strategy because landowners in Texas have the Texas Constitution gives them a lot of rights. Yeah, they're a lot of legal rights. Yes. And the reason why the border wall had such a hard time going up in Texas is because the government had to acquire private land first, and there's a process you go through in order to then seize it for federal use, right? Not like in other places where they've caused a lot of destruction in Arizona and New Mexico, whether it's Indian tribal lands or federally protected environmental lands, which they just, tore out the sensitive plants and just stuck in a wall and have created havoc with the habitat there, with the wildlife there. Here, there's a process. So the landowner coalition really was always intended to be a legal strategy. And we had lawyers who donated their time to represent small landowners in court, small and large landowners. And here it's a variety. My husband and I also are landowners, so we participated in the Landowners Coalition. Our land is in Zapata. And, we got that notice from Border Patrol, well, we want to enter into your property. It's called a right to entry. And the city of Laredo had one of those agreements also. And you basically allow the federal government to come and survey your land. That little bump in the road is the only speed bump to them then coming in and seizing land. And they seize land. They seize the title of the land, right? So landowners took different strategies. Some of them negotiated that right of entry, either lengthened the time or tried to put some restrictions. My husband and I just refused to sign. And so we were in court this whole time to prevent the federal government from stepping onto our land. Because in my opinion, that was that lengthened the process. Yeah. In the end, it's really hard to stand up to the federal government and expect to win. They have a lot of rights. But we have our rights too here in Texas. And so, we took that very seriously, but it didn't become like that it's a ranch property in Zapata, and it didn't become a reality until they came to the city and they said, we're going to seize this land, 69 miles, like all of our city of Laredo land. And I thought, this is where I raised my children. Okay. This is my home. This is threatening the health and welfare of my family and my extended family. And this is where it matters. So you first were exposed to this because the federal government was trying to, basically it's a condemnation, I guess, of your personal property in Zapata. Right. And that sort of really got you No, it wasn't until it was the city of Laredo.
But that sort of like started with then man, you knew what's going on serious. Here? Yeah,
yes.
okay.
It was 2019 when the previous president had a declaration of national emergency. Like it all started with a lie.
Yeah.
Right? That was the most insulting part. How could you pretend that there's an emergency and suggest that we have this invasion? And how long have they said that we've had an invasion on our southern border? How long does an invasion last? Yeah. It's been years now. It's been years. And if you look on the Texas border, the counties or the sectors where the most activity and crossings are happening are the sectors that have border wall. So it was never going to be a deterrent.
Yeah.
It doesn't solve the problems of the drugs coming across because they pass through the bridges. I mean, sadly, Laredo is the largest inland port and does have one of the largest amounts of illegal drugs that cross. But that's a separate issue. It comes across on the bridges.
Yeah.
And, there are all sorts of ways that they're trying to prevent that. But the wall was not one of the ways.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of instances where Trump's wall was built in a lot of different areas. And, I mean, it's been insane in that they have found, for example, that it's been welded through over 4,000 times.
Right. They make little doors.
Yeah, they make little doors, and then they've found hundreds, if not thousands, of makeshift ladders, made from scrap wood. Mm-hmm. I think they put a figure on it: $5 ladders, just strewn just up and down. There's been an insane amount of tunnels that have been discovered.
Right.
Big emphasis on discovered, meaning there's probably so many more that haven't. So, I mean, it was always more of a political sort of
stunt.
A stunt and a way of like, look at me, I'm going to be so tough on this. I'm just going to wall everything off.
Right.
And I'm going to fix it. And people down on the border say that's
false promises.
Well, that's not possible. I mean, it is a big problem. It is a big issue. It has been increasing, and that's obviously due to just instability in a lot of these countries.
Created in large part by the flow of American guns that travel across the border. Yeah. 70% of the guns in Mexico come from the United States.
They call it a river of iron. And you have, I mean, you have it in not only the United States, in Texas. I mean, there's instances where straw buyers will go into a gun shop in Texas and say, give me 30 M16s.
Right.
And, I mean, nobody should need or be allowed to purchase.
Right. Weapons of war.
Weapons of war, but not only weapons of war, that many. I mean, they're obviously up to no good. And so you have that. You have, I mean, the tremendous resources that criminal organizations acquire through the sale of drugs in the United States. With this money, they go and they corrupt these countries at all levels of government. So the instability obviously has a lot to do with what goes on in this country, and just wanting to put a big wall. It obviously didn't solve the problem.
It's ridiculous, and it's such a drain on our economy, right? Course. Because it's a false promise. It doesn't work, and it's just a money pit. Yeah. It's a complete money pit. So, part of our campaign was not just no wall. It was also defund the wall and fund our future. If you're going to come in and drop $1.375 billion in our community, what could $1.375 billion do to improve our community? And if you can raise all of our boats up and improve the economy for everyone, you're going to decrease crime. You're going to decrease all the people who are sucked in by the need for money. Right? You're going to create security in our community in a positive way and in an effective way.
Yeah.
Don't pretend that building this wall that contractors, all the shady deals that contractors were doing, and the fake environmental precautions they were taking, all of that, it was just a waste of money. It was a honeypot attracting all these people to just grab on. And we know that, Steve Bannon is going to jail now because of We Build the Wall, that scam, where they built a private wall right on the edge of the Rio Grande. It was just a scam. It was a complete scam.
It was a stunt. He was telling people that raising money to build a privately funded wall, and they pocketed the money.
There were holes in the yes, there were holes in the foundation early on, and it was never going to work. It was never meant to work, to be honest.
That's true. So to draw a line between that and you running for city council right now. What transpired? What happened from there to now?
That's a good question. So it wasn't just that, right?
Yeah.
The Clean Air Laredo Coalition has been in the news. The EPA, I guess by the time this shows, the meeting may or may not be over, but the EPA is coming to Laredo Environmental Protection Agency to look at a sterilization plant that's spewing a dangerous toxic chemical into our air.
I saw that.
So that also was something that RISC found out about and right away got involved in. And it really is this idea that we should stand together as a community, and our leaders should make decisions that impact the entire community, always thinking of the good of the community.
Yeah.
Right? That it just seems as if with our No Border Wall work and then the other project, the Binational River Conservation Project, that city council districts seem to be very separated. And yet we have these big projects and these big challenges that require the whole city council to act for the benefit of the entire city. So my activism or my being an advocate for these issues led me to think, well, if I think there's a better way to govern, and these issues are very near and dear to me and really impact how I see Laredo welcoming my children back because they're off studying, right? And I want them to feel that Laredo's a great community to raise their families in. Then maybe I can influence that. Maybe I can help be a part of that movement to, of course, respect the needs of the district, and there are many. And I can appreciate the division into districts because it allows you to focus on neighborhoods that perhaps an at-large candidate wouldn't be able to do as easily because there's more space, more area to cover, right? But there really needs to be a unifying theme on council, that actions that we take should be for the benefit of everyone, even if you're focusing on a particular neighborhood or a need in a particular area.
Well, you have and I don't remember who I was talking about this with, but you bring up a great point in that the only elected official that represents the whole city is the mayor, and the mayor doesn't have a vote. He has a tie-breaking vote.
Right.
But the power resides in the city council, and if the city council just cares about the voters that will vote for him in his or her district and cares about doing good to them, with them, then you might be lacking that whole paying attention to the whole entity. And that's obviously just interesting that the city is set up in that way. So you decided, okay, you've been working on all these issues that are of big concern to the citizens as a whole. You decided this seat opened up, and how did the decision come about to run for city council? What was it like? When was that? When did it land in your head, and how did your conversations with your family and friends go?
It just seemed kind of natural, I guess. RISC has been active in presenting to city council, right? A lot of education on different topics. We talked a little bit earlier about the Veterans Museum and the fight a few years back on where it could be located. And that process, that the determination was made, oh, sure, let's have a Veterans Museum at North Central Park. It's a great idea. The city council person at the time liked it and told the one veterans group, and there are several, that sure, that'd be fine. And that's how it was decided. It comes to council. Council says, oh, you like that idea, city council person of that district? Sure, we'll go along with it. And nobody thought about whether that was really...
It makes sense.
If it made a lot of sense to have a Veterans Museum, which, to be clear, I believe the city of Laredo would be well served by a Veterans Museum. Yeah. I have complete respect for the veterans in our community. My uncle came back from the Pacific Theater in World War II, and he was a very reserved man, didn't do a lot of talking about his time, and I later just came to realize that he was on one of those ships. He probably had some trauma occur. Yeah. But he was a wonderful person, just very reserved and quiet. But I have a lot of respect for veterans who have fought on our behalf, on the country's behalf. And so I think it would be great to teach that to the next generation. There's nothing like having a museum where kids go and visit when they're in grade school and middle school and understand the history and the heroes in our community, right? I do think that centers a child, that gives them strength to understand who they are and from where they come. So I would love to see one. I just do not believe that it belonged in North Central Park. And then there were some ideas about bringing in different tanks and airplanes and things, which just creates a different character to the museum. All of these ideas are great, but in order to create a museum, a nonprofit, there are steps you have to take, and it just didn't seem like those were very well thought out.
Well, you have a park, a beautiful park that was built for people jogging and bike riding and frisbee and picnics and
yes, a focus on the natural.
Yeah, and to put just a museum just on a whim in the middle of it, I mean, it's just not good planning. There's a time and a place for everything, and putting that there. I remember very well. So that issue, how did that play into the...
We made an effort and reached out to council members and reached out to the community, held a forum at the National Guard Armory, and it was just a lot of education, right? Once people understood the issues, it wasn't... We meant no disrespect to the veterans. It was not that. It was about finding a proper place for this museum. And that sort of started this idea. There's not a black box that exists for council people who, or people who decide to run. It's not as if they have some special power. And so once you understand that governing is about good people coming together, sharing ideas, and try to plan for progress in the future, and that everyone is learning and educating themselves to find out what the best path is, then it's accessible. And so I just felt that my experiences after all this time raising my children here, I was the director of the Imaginarium of South Texas for a while. I participated as a teacher trainer in the Texas Regional Collaborative, and so that also was about educating. I don't know, I just felt like I had something to share. And I definitely have this desire to create a community that is welcoming and encourages children to grow and become wonderful, independent people. That's kind of, I think, at the core of why I believe I can contribute. I just made that decision, and here I am.
I wanted to ask you, so the city, there's always all these controversies. Recently, you had an employee in a very dramatic scene go up before council complaining about the toxic work environment. I mean, you have the water boil notices, the dysfunction. I mean, we could go on and on and on.
It seems like everything is falling apart all at once.
Yeah. What do you attribute that to, and how would you fix that?
So I think, I don't know what to attribute it to. What I hope will fix it is insisting on a more formalized and respectful process at City Hall. So I've been block walking, and I still have a lot of neighborhoods to get to, a lot of people to talk to. But even at, in people's homes, they're telling me that there's dysfunction in city government, that the work environment is it's not professional, and that there's too much nepotism or people's friends getting jobs over them. Issues that you expect city government to run at the most ethical level that there is, and to serve as a model for all other businesses that are operating here. And it just seems as if city government's been treated too much like, and I don't mean to say women are excluded, obviously, but like an old boys club or the old private club, right? Where it depends on who you know, and that's what gets you in, and that's what gets you in good graces. And that is the antithesis of how city government should run, because you need to have the public trust, because you are dealing with the public monies. Yeah. And so in order to encourage trust in government and faith in that decisions are made in the best interests of the city as a whole, and not on these relationships like that Dannenbaum scandal that happened, not on special interests or the interests of people who are receiving money on the side or things like that. You must have a professional work environment. That's just, you follow rules. And so I think more of that needs to be instilled. And I think that has a lot to do with the city manager. We do have a city manager form of government. The city manager is in control of city departments, and that should be respected. So we hear a lot about micromanaging and city council members getting involved on the department level or with associate directors and trying to sway and influence decision making. Mm-hmm. So that should not occur. Mm-hmm. And so as a council member, I think you can insist on that. I think everyone should take a pledge. They're not going to interfere in the functionings of city government. And then we also need to make sure that there's a process for grievances by the employees that's respected, that is a place where if there is dysfunction in the department, employees can go and tell someone and not worry about retribution. What was so shocking about what Ms. Ortiz was talking about when she was talking about the toxic work environment is that she also had a fear of retribution for coming up and speaking about the need for a professional level of work. And that's disturbing. Yeah. How do you work in that kind of environment? That we shouldn't ask anyone to work in that kind of environment, especially our city employees. Yeah,
that was a pretty shocking event. But it goes back, it just adds to the list of stuff you keep hearing over and over again. You brought up the city manager. position, which is a strong. We do have a strong city manager, weak mayor position, strong city council. We saw recently the resignation of Keith Selman, who, in my opinion, was doing a great job, the kind of city manager that we need. So now there's a vacancy, there's an interim, and there will be another search for another city manager. The last few times have been shams in that they conduct this nationwide search, but they know already who they have in mind, and that's who they end up picking. They waste everybody's time. So you, if elected, one of the first decisions will be the city manager selection process. What are your thoughts on how that process should run, and what kind of candidate should be picked? Would you pick?
I would. So the last committee search that was held, the council completely ignored the committee's recommendations.
Yeah.
And so I think I thought that the committee did a thorough job, and I'm very comfortable with having different city business leaders and other leaders in the community contribute to being on that committee, to doing a full vetting of the candidates, and then I would follow the recommendations. I mean, I do believe that the city council has an interest in interviewing candidates, but in the end, I would believe that the level of professionalism in those candidates is such that you basically follow the recommendation of your committee because they've been vetted, they've been interviewed at that level. So I would accept their recommendation.
You're for the creation of another ad hoc committee like the one that was set up last time?
Yeah, well, so I think it takes into consideration whatever local flavor you think needs to be in there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these are leaders in the community that know the city of Laredo and its history, and if there's a special focus that they think the city manager should have or a special strength, they're going to be looking for that in a candidate. So I would have trust in their recommendation. I know that the other option is to engage a firm to do that, a special firm. But I just feel sometimes, and I don't mean this as a blanket statement, but I just feel that sometimes consultants that come in don't always do as thorough a job. We saw that with a traffic study that came out not too long ago, and they were talking about the problems on the Mines Road and looking at bridge traffic and how do you relieve some of the congestion for the residents there. And I don't know how you reverse poor city planning, right? When you have all these neighborhoods growing up next to industrial parks, it's an issue. And then next to these incredibly busy bridges. But aside from that, the consultants did not have a good understanding of the traffic patterns. And, our local people were correcting them on the figures that were being presented. So I don't always trust that consultants always get it right. And so in this search, a city manager search, I think an ad hoc committee with a variety of leaders in the community is a good way to go.
You've brought up the desire for your children to have a Laredo that they want to come back and live and establish their families here. And it's well known that for a while now, Laredo's youth leave and don't come back. And there's actually just memes and stuff that make fun of leaving Laredo, that there's nothing to do here. What do you think the problem is, and what would you do to try to correct that, create more opportunities for the youth? Right now, there's obviously a very vibrant international trade industry, and employs a ton of people, and but at the same time, it's because we are in the geographical most logical route between the United States and Mexico. And that's about it.
The gateway to the Americas.
We're the gateway to the Americas.
Well, and then you can't. I think we here in Laredo do not appreciate the unique nature of our city and how attractive it can be.
Yeah.
This merging of cultures and our bilingualism, that really does create a unique community. And I think it was, we were looked as the sort of the stopping point to go to Nuevo Laredo so many years ago.
Yeah.
And now we can become a destination, but we have to invest in ourselves and become that destination. Yeah. And it does require some of kind of separating from this negative narrative about cartel violence that people assume occur here. Laredo is one of the safest cities in the entire nation. And that's true of most border cities, right?
Yeah.
And I think we get painted with a broad brush, and people misunderstand all the time the differences between Laredo and Nuevo Laredo. So, you know, this idea about what we can do and how we can invest in ourselves, the Binational River Conservation Project, which is the Greenbelt, 6.2 miles of Greenbelt from the Laredo Water Museum down to Chacoan Park, that will be reflected on the Nuevo Laredo side, has stirred so much controversy. And I really don't understand why. It is an incredible opportunity to create an economic engine on our border that showcases the beauty that we have living here on the riverside. And it is an opportunity to create spaces where the public can come and enjoy art, enjoy music, enjoy culture, enjoy nature. And it would create that destination that exists in so many other cities and that young people and young families look for when they're looking for opportunities to, have something to do with their families.
Yeah, I think that it's become I don't know if controversial, but definitely a flashpoint within the debate during this election season. There's a lot of people that say our water system's falling apart. It breaks down every few months. They're raising water rates, tax rates, you name it, and then you see the amounts that are being floated in terms of how much this binational park would cost, and they say, you know what, it sounds fabulous, but we should really fix our infrastructure first, namely the water, and there's arguments where we have to get the basics right. We have to get fire, police, water, sewage, trash pickup right if we want to be spending on all those on all these other issues that, while are good, they're not essential for the proper functioning of the city. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think cities walk and chew gum at the same time all the time. So this is not this isn't a prioritizing list of things to do. Yes, our water infrastructure needs to function. It is a problem in many cities in Texas. It's not just the city of Laredo. It has to do with aging water infrastructure and with cities not willing to invest money to take care of these issues along the way. They've waited, like the city of Laredo has waited, and now we're 50 years in, and we need to replace the pipes. And, the state of Texas is sitting on either $27 billion to $40 billion in ARPA in funds that were released during the COVID time. And maybe the state of Texas can drop a chunk of change into these cities to help us out. But at the same time, we should never stop investing in ourselves, because cities you need to invest in yourself in order to have a return. This, I think, is even a basic business concept, where the only way to get return on your investment is to actually invest in yourselves.
Yeah.
So the city of San Antonio, and it's a completely different scale, I understand that, but the city of San Antonio extended their Mission Reach, the Riverwalk that occurs from downtown to the Pearl area, and it was about $170 million. And the return on investment has been $2 billion plus. Mm-hmm. They made a conscientious decision to create this area that would attract economic investment. Mm-hmm. The city of Laredo does that too with different tax abatement incentives, and they try to create a way to invite business investment. This is that. Mm-hmm. This is trying to attract business investment. It does not require a huge sum of money all at once. Mm-hmm. There are several different ways to do this. You know, in the city of Laredo, the city of San Antonio had the city funds, county funds, and also the San Antonio River Authority, which is its own taxing entity, contribute dollars for that investment. They were creative in their financing in doing that, and it happened over time. The same thing could happen here in Laredo. This big idea, this vision to have this incredibly developed green belt that would connect the north side to the south side, and you could see this extending along the riverbank in the future. It can start with a seed. It doesn't require, if you envision it completely done, and yes, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars, but if you understand it starts at a point and then it just keeps developing over time, those are small investments over time, and we can get help. Congressman Cuellar has initiated the first source of funds with an earmark. That, yeah. It's going to be used to help us with our water issue, with the sustainability of our water system by taking care of invasive species and replanting with native ones, which we need to do in order to protect our water source. So that's dealing with the water issue. And at the same time, it's going to create a destination space, a monarch habitat that will be mimicked on the other side, not directly across, but in different areas in Nuevo Laredo. So we can create monarch habitat and hopefully attract this and support this endangered species, and that will help us become a destination point. And that will be attractive to families here in Laredo, to get them to the water side, but also to enjoy this incredible, I don't know if you remember when the monarchs would come through in such grand numbers. Yeah. It was amazing. So it's not just Laredo, right? The species is collapsing because of a lot of different factors.
Climate-related factors.
Yes, and their habitat in Mexico. But this is a way to support that species and try to bring it back. It also develops our unique habitat for birds, and we are a destination for ecotourism. Birders come from all over the country, and some of them come from outside of our country. Yeah. Yes, to see the unique species that we host here. So you can't think of it as this huge block of money that we can't do until we get everything else fixed. That's not how cities run, right? We create amenities for the people that live here. We create incentives for economic development. This project would target small business development and local small business development, while at the same time, you're taking care of basic city services like water infrastructure and fire and police and everything else that you need to run a city.
Can you tell, I mean, I've heard, I've looked into the, yes, go ahead. I've paid attention to the discussion a bit. But what doesn't comprise is this binational river project? From where to where would it run? And it's a swath of land.
It's a swath of land.
Runs on both sides of the border.
Yes.
And it runs from where to where, and what would be placed along this, I guess, thin swaths of land. I mean, thin in relative to
the big map.
Yeah, to the big map.
But you're talking about 500 acres on this side of the river and 500 acres in Nuevo Laredo.
Okay.
And it would run from, at the outset, from the Laredo Water Museum.
Which is where?
Laredo Water Museum, Jefferson Water Plants.
Okay.
Down to Chacuan Creek.
Okay.
And there are already projects that have been developed. The city of Laredo has invested a lot of money in the river bend and the rehabilitation of the river bend, and they're going to be opening up trails, and they hope to put a visitor center there. It's a beautiful piece of property right along the bend of the river. And with the new trails, it'll open up these wonderful nature paths for people to take their families to.
Okay, I see.
And there are already people who are either, biking in the wonderful trails right along the river, closer to the World Trade Bridge, right? But they can make their path all the way down to the south. It's just awkward, and there are places that don't connect. So this green belt would begin at the Jefferson Water Plant and go down and connect all that.
Organize all of that.
Yes, organize it, take advantage of projects that already exist, create amenities and green space in places that don't, rehabilitate the environment right there along the river's edge. And that's important for the sustainability of the river for our future.
Okay.
So invasive species suck out a lot of water from the Rio Grande.
What are you talking about when you're talking about invasive
A mature
species?
salt cedar tree,
Okay.
which are big tall trees that have like pines. They're kind of spiky looking. It's probably not a great description. There are many of them along our riverbank. It's an invasive species. They drink about 200 gallons of water a day.
Oh, wow.
The Carrizo cane, that, it's very difficult to get rid of Carrizo cane because the roots lie underneath the soil, and they're right by the riverbank. If you rip them out, if you were just to say, well, we're getting rid of everything, we're just going to rip it all out, then you create a huge erosion problem because there's nothing for the bank to stay on, the soil to stay on the bank, right? So you need to do that cautiously. But a Carrizo cane plant will take out 30 gallons of water a day per plant, and we have thousands of plants, right? And Carrizo cane is also difficult because you can get rid of a whole swath, right? Hopefully you've done it in the environmentally correct way, and then a big flood comes and they bring in seed from upriver, and it settles right into the soil, and it starts all over again.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Spanish explorers. There is native cane, and that cane drinks less water, but you need native plants to secure the soil to the riverbank so that you don't dump a lot of soil into the river and cause problems with sedimentation. It becomes a security issue if there's a lot of sedimentation because the river gets shallower. We lose water when there's sedimentation because it's shallower and there's more evaporation. So there's all sorts of benefits to creating good environmental habitat along the river, to making sure it's healthy. And this grant, these federal dollars that Congressman Cuellar helped us to get, do that. And
I don't think that's been very
well understood,
well explained or understood.
So this conservation
people just
project,
think a park. They just think picnic tables and trees and.
So Binational River Park is a lot easier to say than Binational River Conservation Project. But the Binational River Conservation Project is more descriptive because it really is about conserving the river. Okay. We do it for the benefit of our community. Yeah. So, you're spending these dollars to help our water supply, to help the bank be stable and provide a sustainable water supply in the future. But you want it to be a place that we can go and enjoy as well. So it becomes an amenity.
Of course.
Those two projects go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so this is why I don't understand the
animosity
towards the project. Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think that you certainly have explained it in such a way that it makes a whole lot more sense when you look at the ecological aspect of it and why that's important.
When you do that, when you create a really nice place for people to enjoy, then along the edges, small businesses start to pop up because they're catering to that audience.
Of course.
And that creates an economic engine.
I see.
And you can create it in a way where you're really targeting local businesses, that you kind of prevent the commercialization of it to an extent.
You do it carefully.
Yes, you do it carefully. Okay. You also have to be careful about not displacing people in lower income neighborhoods that perhaps see this huge benefit to having all of this development around them. Mm-hmm. You want to put in some safeguards for people to be able to remain in their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
It should be a carefully thought out plan, and the Binational Technical Working Group, which is another long name, is working to try to sort out those issues in the planning of this development.
That's very interesting. I had no idea all of this that you're telling me. We're running out of time. I'm gonna thank a couple of our sponsors before we wrap it up. Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank our good friend Javier Cuate Mendoza and Mendoza Maintenance Group. He's been one of our first sponsors. He does industrial, commercial cleaning, office buildings, warehouses, you name it. Look him up, Mendoza Maintenance Group. Thank you for your sponsorship. We also want to thank our good friend Vish, who's also a candidate for City Council. Vish is a small business owner who has taken a stand on various issues facing the city. He will prioritize our water needs, keep our taxes in check, take a strong stance against corruption, and will get citizens involved in the decision-making process. Want different results, make a difference choice. That's Vishwanath. We also have attorney George Altgelt, Laredo's premier criminal defense firm. The Altgelt Law Office relies not only on its years of experience and proven results, but also makes use of cutting-edge forensic scientists and its team of private investigators to defend your freedom. I know George personally, and he has always fought to keep the government honest and to protect the rights of citizens. That's what he did when he was a prosecutor, and that's what he will, and when he was an elected official, and that's what he will do for you or your loved ones. And finally, we have our good friend Rene Benavides. He's also an attorney. He does personal injury, criminal law, and immigration work. Great attorney, great person, Rene Benavides. Look him up when you need an attorney. And that does it for our sponsors. Melissa, we've had a great conversation. We've gone for an hour already. I wanted to ask you closing thoughts.
I have really enjoyed being on the campaign trail. I really like to meet people and to hear their stories, and to think that if I'm elected, that I could make decisions that will impact their lives very directly for the better. It's a tremendous honor. It would be a tremendous honor, and I'm very touched by that. I'm very moved by that. I think we all want the same things. It doesn't matter sort of where we come from or our socioeconomic status. We want a better life for our families and for our children. And the city has the power to do that. City government can really impact people's lives for the better. Mm-hmm. And it's a tremendous responsibility. I take that very seriously. But it would be a tremendous honor. So I that's what I strive for.
Thank you very much. That's Melissa Cigarroa, candidate for City Council District 3. She will be on the ballot. Early voting starts
October 24th.
October 24th.
Through November 4th.
Through November 4th, and that's 2 weeks.
And then election, almost.
One weekend, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then election day is November 8th.
And the big day is November.
So, but make your voting plan, vote early.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
It's a big election year. There's going to be
a big election year.
A lot of candidates on the ballot, which is great, I think, for the democratic process.
I think it's great too. Yes. And for the Democratic Party, I'm a Democratic precinct chair.
Okay.
So we have an incredible slate of candidates for government offices. So starting from governor all the way down to land commissioner and ag commissioner and Yes, it's an exciting year.
It's going to be a big, big year. The polls are looking really good.
Yes.
The latest polls that came out. So it's crunch time.
It is.
It's crunch time. So, Melissa, thank you so much
Thank you.
for being here with us. And on behalf of Frontera Radio, that about does it. We have coming up, Fernando Baldasso will be here early next week. So that's City Council District 6, which is also a huge one, getting a lot of attention. So tune in for that. So on behalf of Frontera Radio, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. May God bless you and have a good night.